I've played both the Division 1 and 2. Like everything Ubisoft does, they have a really cool and interesting idea, but the execution is subpar. The story of the Division 1 is interesting, a manufactured viral outbreak in New York. An entirely believable concept. Then the idea of the Division, a government-funded covert collection of highly trained, militarized agents that reside among the population of the United States. Upon activation, it's expected of them to respond and handle whatever situation they are told to handle. With the right ideas, execution, and story, this could have been one of the best IPs Ubisoft could have had. It would have opened the doors to tons of different games, sequels, prequels, and spin-offs. We could have seen games that take place before Division 1, of people being recruited into the Division after they show off their skills, or limited agent activations in the past. But of course, D1 had to play to the times, and the times demanded a looter shooter. And that's what we got. A looter shooter that has no idea what it wants to be. It wants to have a compelling thriller plot, but also trying to be a disaster movie. It wants to be like Destiny, where it has gear variety and special aspects to weapons and armor. But then it also wants to be the typical Ubisoft game where every aspect of the mechanics is underthought. If I had it my way, Division 1 would at first start out as a less personalized disaster plot, but as you make progress, it turns into a thriller. And I would also do away with the looter shooter aspects. After 6 months, everyone figures out the best meta build and just runs that the whole time, effectively nullifying the idea of build variety. I'm not going to go over the plot of the game because I honestly can't remember it, and even though I just did a second playthrough of it, I couldn't be bothered to pay attention, and I don't care enough to research it. What I am going to do is start with the changes. For one, get rid of the pseudo-MMORPG side of it. We can keep the open world aspect of it because in a setting like this, open world plays to the potential strengths the game can have. As far as weapons and armor goes, instead of a million different items, reduce it down significantly. You don't have to worry about damage output because there aren't 20 different sniper rifles or shotguns, just one of each. This would also put all of PvP on a level playing field. I know, the tryhards in the audience want to have a stomp fest because their fragile egos need it, but I don't care. Speaking of PvP, keep the Dark Zone, but rather than it becoming a pseudo-extraction shooter, turn it into something more. Keep the PvP and PvE aspects to it, but have small missions that can take place within it, such as extracting stranded groups of civilians or JTF soldiers from other NPCs and rogue agents, whether they be NPC agents or players that decide to go rogue themselves. The Dark Zone should be a place where anything goes. If you want to roleplay as a ruthless rogue agent that hunts down others for sport, so be it. If you want to be an agent that adheres to the principles of the Division, that's A-OK. If you want to get a taste of being rogue for a bit, but don't want to fully commit to it, sure. The Dark Zone should be a terrifying place that only the most sadistic or hardened agents dare to go into. Missions within the Dark Zone would border between story and multiplayer. You can go in to extract lost JTF members, or NPC Division agents. While extracting, you will be assaulted by NPC agents and other players if they choose to go rogue. You can also help others doing these extraction missions. The rewards of the Dark Zone missions can be cosmetics, and very rarely legendary weapons. I'm talking 1 in a million or a billion chance of getting them. This way, when you do run into somebody in PvP that has a weapon like this, it's maybe one person, instead of the entire server being filled with them. The servers would also check who has these weapons, and would limit how many players with legendaries can be in one server. Possibly a hidden reputation system as well. If you have a legendary weapon, but complete NPC missions more than PvP, you can be allowed in the same session as another player that has a legendary that does more PvP than missions. This way, you can act as a balance against the PvP player. Lastly, chock the game full of world-building things to do. Helping civilians in trouble, finding missing pets, having to occasionally take some antivirals after you enter into a contaminated area. All kinds of stuff. Also, show us just how unrestrained the agents are. Have missions and side missions where you break not only local and federal laws, but cross moral lines to achieve your goals. Make these agents have to do things that would make the Geneva Convention faint. I want to see the darkest depths of what one has to do when society is crumbling around them. Side note, Ubisoft, collectible stuff like phone recordings of events is not engaging. The Echo recreations are a good idea, but should not be relied upon. Also, reading background lore is boring as hell. I play a game to be engaged, not scroll through menus to read about things that could have been a mission. The Division is wholly grounded in reality, which I can get behind. But because there are no aliens, there are no ghosts and goblins, eldritch creatures, it has to rely purely on character drama. The game we got doesn't have that. No character is really compelling. They all have that jaded, brash personality, and I know it's set in New York, but I'm pretty sure that city consists of more than just the "I'm too old for this shit" archetype. I can't bring myself to be more invested in any of them past, "this is good guy, so therefore they are good." Possibly the only character that has even a modicum of interesting development is Keener, and it's just nothing but phone recordings and some echoes. This will be a bit counterintuitive, but the game could have used a metric ton more cutscenes. And I'm not talking about the recordings you receive after finishing main missions that serve as pseudo cutscenes. No, I'm talking shit like at the beginning of the game, or the one you get when starting a survival session. Omnipresent cameras. As per my Halo obsession, I must reference it as many times as possible. You know what's engaging? Gameplay. You know what else is engaging too? Cinematics. Imagine if in this section, instead of getting a close-up personal cutscene of Chief and Cortana reuniting, it was all done in-game, and you pressed RB to slot Cortana into your skull. It wouldn't have nearly the emotional impact it did as a cutscene. Could you imagine if The Division had more cinematics like this, where we get to see them at the end of a mission, walk up to a now heavily injured boss, they kneel down, the music accenting the scene with a dark score. We press a handgun to their skull and fire. Yes, a little bit cliché, but it would be memorable. That would set a tone. That would engage me more than shoot bullet sponge enemy until health bar is gone, watch ragdoll physics bug out, stand around while characters drone on over the comms about useless stuff for 30 seconds. Sometimes I wish Halo didn't set the bar so high, so that I wouldn't be so jaded towards shitty game design. Now for the revamped plot. Scrap the whole first and second wave of Division agents. Just have it an overall initiative of agents flowing in. Because, once again, we get a game that takes place after the cool shit happens. Whatever took place that the first wave experienced was so soul-crushing that it incited agents to go rogue. Something that was completely unthinkable until like halfways into the first game. Ubisoft hinted towards all these terrible and depraved things that happened, jangling keys in front of my face. But instead of getting to experience the shit firsthand, we just get people hinting at how bad it was. But how do we convey to the player just how bad things are getting? Make the impact of what's going on in New York seen in other places, such as surrounding states beginning to block incoming civilians from entering. Not just because they're from New York, but also because isolated cases of the green poison showing up in neighboring states. As the situation in the city deteriorates, instead of just keeping the peace and only having to kill the most depraved of people, now it seems like you're gunning down everyone you see, with a near hopeless situation building and no end in sight. You begin to get the first reports of rogue agents. At first, no one believes it. Maybe dissidents getting their hands on Division tech. But in one mission, you are ambushed by a rogue that pushes you to the limits of your skills. This suddenly adds a new and incredibly dangerous enemy to the already growing list of foes you're dealing with. Not only that, but people around you are beginning to doubt if you're able to be trusted as well. Are you going to get fed up with the whole situation? Your shade tech rings start glowing red, and suddenly everyone around you is the next in line for a bullet. This would make your eventual success in turning the New York disaster around all that more character defining. While other agents were giving up and fending for themselves, you stayed true to your mission and saw it to the end. Little snippets of dialogue from JTF and civilians will give you the idea that some people think it best to just cut the losses and firebomb the whole city. Others want to try and save it. Of course, this being a linear story, you will leave the city in a better place than what it started out as. But how you get to that end state is going to be dark. The player who pays attention will ask themselves if whether the methods they had to employ to save the city were worth it or not. All of these terrible things the player has to do can bring into question whether the agent is actually helping or causing more trouble. Sure, breaking every law known to this state is getting things done. But are you only causing more fracturing of law and order? Or will your actions eventually lead to a stable outcome? Only time will tell. Have civilians and the JTF comment on what's being done. The JTF can voice their opinions in a grim but understanding way, whereas civilians might be more chastising of what you've done. If possible, have missions have multiple ways of ending them: peacefully, violently, neutral, etc. Allow the player to build their agent to be whatever kind of character they want them to be. A saint of the people, a tough but fair agent, a ruthless and cold government merc. The Dark Zone would have been an already built structure, acting as a mass quarantine zone, but now has a more symbolic notion to it. Those who call it home are the most depraved individuals. When you decide to enter, a weight is added to you, knowing just how sadistic you might have to get to survive. Now, when I say I want the game to be filled to the brim with side missions that help fill out the world, I mean cram as much as you can into it. I want side missions that get dark. I want side missions that don't do anything more than build characters. Some you won't see again. I want side missions that have no impact outside of their own self-contained story. But those are sometimes the most memorable. Like the mission on screen, you're attempting to find one of the main character's ex-wife. By the end of it, you do.
Oh. Hello. I knew if I just started playing again, someone would find me.
But you don't get that pat on the back, commendations from everyone around you. Hell, the character that gives you the personal mission doesn't even weigh in. Which, in my headcanon, the agent simply waits till a later time to report that they found the woman, but that she was dead already. You stand by her, while she plays the piano, waiting for death as a previous echo reveals she's been infected. She's performing the same song used in the Halo 3 commercial, that being Chopin Prelude, Raindrop. I don't know if Ubisoft did this as a nod to Halo or not, but I was able to appreciate the moment a bit more because of it. There's a reason this mission stuck with me, despite the rest of the forgettable campaign. It was an isolated moment that had no effect on the rest of the world. The virus wasn't cured. The bad guys weren't lined up and shot. We didn't see celebratory jets fly overhead while a World War II vet kisses a woman in the street. The ending of this mission is simple, down to earth, melancholy.
As frank as Frankenstein, as blunt as an atom bomb!
100% atmosphere building! And I wish there were 200 more missions like this. Though, knowing Ubisoft, they'd all be mediocre, so maybe one mission is better than 200. I want the game to ooze with atmosphere, not only in the setting and characters, but with the environment too. I want days to be a reprieve from the night, not just another part of the skybox cycle. I want the night sky to glow red with the fires of the burning sky. I want there to be rolling blizzards like what you get in survival that modify the difficulty, forcing you to find warm spots even if you are wearing appropriate clothing. The night should also bring devastating enemies, emboldened by the secluded nature of nightfall. Every time the sun starts to set, I want the player to make a decision, find a safe zone and wait it out, or chance the hazards. Fight enemies that put you to shame, risk getting stuck in a raging blizzard, and freeze to death. On top of all of this, I want the PvE open world section outside of the dark zone to show the dark side of human nature as well. Public executions that you can't make it in time to stop. JTF soldiers getting overwhelmed in firefights you could have been able to turn the tides of. Bodies littering the streets, hanging from light poles. I want the player to ask themselves if it's worth saving the city, if they should just put down the controller and find something else, less grim to take up their time. I want the player to feel disgusting, not only in what they see, but what their players will have to do as well. Sacrificing hostages for long-term equipment, letting JTF be slaughtered as a distraction so that you can get the flank on the enemy. Overall, I want The Division to be what Ubisoft tried to sell Patriots as, a game where the lines in morality are so heavily blurred, you have no idea if you actually are the good guy. But of course, this company is addicted to talking up their products and selling us a heavily stripped down, dialed back, and mediocre version. Watch Dogs, Siege. Funny enough, Ubisoft's best titles are their arcade games, like Trials. Say it with me, Ubisoft isn't AAA.
I went in the desert, I went searching for the truth. I stumbled across you and I know you're not the truth. I went in the ocean, I went looking for some love. All I found is that I haven't found enough. Temptation.